Finding your voice, purpose, destiny. What I can say is, because you're here, you have chosen an uncommon and to some degree unorthodox path in your life. And I would say you've graduated from a lot of the limits of common acceptance and the fundamentalism of orthodoxy. And you have, and I would say still do, participate in the day in, day out, hurly-burly marketplace of life, where deals are made and strings are attached, and it's frequently referred to as the real world. But at the same time that you engage in that world, you have also chosen, or maybe you could say been called to, a hidden inner journey that really is the ultimate aim of all of the striving of that bustling marketplace. And in your involvement with Trillium Awakening is a tantric process of self-realization and deep personal healing. And since there's some new people here, I want to be sure of one thing, and that is this word tantra, I want to be sure we're all on the same page with, because it's largely misunderstood in the West. This is not a tantric process in the sense that it's mostly about sexuality. I like Cynthia Bourgeault's description of Tantra as being a distinct and ancient lineage that's based on a comprehensive metaphysics. And that metaphysics holds that the material world is not a mirage and it's not a trap. Rather, it's an integral part of ultimate reality, and it has a unique and indispensable role to play in the process of embodied awakening. So it isn't as if we don't have a positive valuation of sexuality. We do, but it's only in the same sense that we have a positive valuation of everything physical. And we encourage you to get into the sensual delight of being alive. You know, tantric process is about having your awakening being in that place where you see and hear and taste and touch and smell and feel your life. And the secret sauce of this process is the transmission. And I should probably define that too. By transmission, we mean a subtle event whereby the radiant, awakened, and embodied condition of the teacher gets communicated silently by means of a resonance effect, like a pair of tuning forks, one of which has been struck. And this transmission does two things. It tends to activate or to catalyze or jumpstart your own recognition of yourself as consciousness. And it also tends to deconstruct all of the patchwork of splints and braces and shields and helmets and armor that we inevitably accumulate to protect ourselves from the assaults and the vagaries of the world. And supplementing this transmission is the primary practice of this work, which we call green lighting, which involves turning towards rather than away from all of those disturbing sensations and feelings and reactions that arise in us from time to time in our lives. And in most conventional spiritual circles are thought of as being something to avoid on the spiritual path. But it's something that we embrace. And through that embrace, these things are transformed and ultimately realized not only to not have been obstacles to the realization, but actually not even to be separate from that precious goal. So green lighting is a practice that cooperates with the kind of evolutionary acceleration that the transmission represents. And as I mentioned in the description of this sitting, we're going to talk about mainly the period of time immediately after this whole being realization process. It's a process of deconstruction that really takes off and actually goes much deeper after you're really fully here as a stably awakened individual. And what we mean by stably awakened is it doesn't take any effort or attention on your part to have that knowingness of your wholeness be a given in your life. And what happens at this time is the light of being shines down into all the cracks and crevices and dark corners of our body minds. And as a result, all of the automatisms, all of the presumptions, all of the assumptions, all of the conceptions, the beliefs, all the habits of mind that were just taken for granted as being who we were and how the world is before this awakening, now have to be kind of reconfigured under the impact of this awakening. And this deeper work happens in our body minds, but also, and here's the thing, increasingly in an area that has sometimes been spoken of as a bridge between spirit and matter, and that is our souls. Between boundless spirit and limited matter is the soul. Or we might call it the deeper personality, where our individuality is still present, but it also contains mythic and archetypal forces, and it also contains the seeds of our destiny. And much of the transformation that occurs in this post-awakening time is often described or could be viewed as breaking open the wall that we all construct around our hearts to protect them from the traumas of our lives. And the heart is not just a physical organ. And actually, the heart is 67% neurons. And I would say the heart is also an energetic realm. It's a place of knowing which contains deep imagination and hidden dreams. And that's why we speak of this post-awakening portion of your journey as sacred reconfiguration. Why sacred? Because there are divine archetypes awaiting your discovery. There are dimensions of your being which have been seated in your soul and are waiting to sprout. And over time, and when I say over time, I mean years, I don't know, maybe 5, 8, I don't know, in some people's experience, 10 years. The advancing movement of your awakening takes them ever deeper into their particular life's inner and inherent meanings. And as the certainties of their previous life start to shift, they can start to feel kind of heartbreaking, as if the sand beneath your feet is shifting and you're not sure of your footing in your life. But what's actually breaking are the lifelong shackles and fetters of habit and mistaken identity. And when this breakage happens, we're not really, I don't think, broken down, but more, I would say accurately, broken open, revealing the deeper gifts and genius that was seated in each of our souls when we entered this realm. And curiously enough, the place where our deepest gifts reside is also the place of some of our deepest wounds. And these wounds can be both personal and ancestral. All of our bodies contain cellular material which we receive from our parents. and those parents receive from their parents, and so that means we receive from our grandparents, and we receive from our great-grandparents, and so on. Cellular memory goes way back. And you've probably all heard about, or heard of the archetype of the wounded healer. And we're all in some ways wounded healers. We're people called to be of service who also have some wounds and scabs and scars. And this idea of a wounded healer is a pretty old one, actually. There's the Arthurian legend of the Fisher King. And it actually goes all the way back to the Greeks, where there was Chiron, the centaur healer, who was always carrying the wound that he received from one of Heracles' poisoned arrows. So we are both gifted and wounded, light and dark, abundant and deprived, and unified and opposed. And I think this proximity of our giftedness and our woundedness is what makes this journey to finding our destiny feel like it's kind of uncertain and maybe even daunting. And it's for this reason that our gifts often feel like they come from the shyest and tenderest parts of ourselves. And the thing is, being willing to speak and to live from those tenderest dimensions requires a good deal of courage. Because there's really no act of courage that doesn't spring from the fertile field of vulnerability. And what I found in this journey is that as we greenlight or radically embrace, and radical, when I say radical, I don't mean extreme, I mean the mathematical definition at the root. Radically embrace these wounded parts of ourselves. The healing of the wound comes from the balm of our conscious attention. The gentle holding and being with and breathing through the experience of these pains is the way that they are assuaged. And this takes time and often a good deal of repetition. But lo and behold, one day, we find ourselves living from, and even maybe in our daily lives, teaching from the sprouting seeds of our destiny, of who we were actually here to be all along. And those teachings are usually shaped also by the scars of those old wounds. And I'm certain that there are, in this meeting today, potential mystics and devotees and saints and sages and yogis and prophets and shamans and warriors and lovers and heroes and scholars and revolutionaries, and each of which, in their own way, in their own world, in their own manner, help to usher in what is going to be the next epic of our human collective life here. And I, being 74 with emphysema, and perhaps some of you as well, may not live to see that new epoch, but each will make our own contribution just the same. And you know, the truth is, all it really takes for the seeds of destiny of your life to sprout is time, usually measured in years, and the desire and the fortitude to persist in your journey. And it's a journey because even though the gifts are near at hand, they often seem really far away, don't they? And I'm here to tell you that your longings, however undefined they may be, or if they're very specific, however unrealistic they may seem, they are a haunting call from a larger future self that's beckoning. So how do we work with this process? How do we get to the core of our apple or pear, or what if we're a cantaloupe? There's a lot of seeds. And how do we find our seeds and become who we're actually here to be? Because this is really a birthright that we're talking about here. And so there's a number of things that I could say about that. In this work, one of the things is the transmission. At every stage along this process, it is the X factor which can streamline and accelerate your particular evolutionary current. And different teachers have different transmissions. And at the trilliumawakening.org website, most of the teachers have gazing videos up there. And what I would suggest to you is that there's a whole table of appetizers waiting to be sampled there. And each of these videos has, maybe a minute or 2 minutes at the most. But I would suggest, rather than just one time, unless it may be that you gaze with some teacher on their video one time and you know immediately, okay, this is a guy for me or the woman for me. But I would suggest probably, only take a few minutes each time. You could do it a couple times a day for, 3 days. And pay attention during those 3 days if you feel any shift in how the world presents itself to you. And if you do, then maybe this is the teacher who has the force and the frequency of their transmission that matches you very well. And currently there's 41 teachers, so it's a pretty large buffet table. And so maximize your exposure to the transmission. And it's always a good idea if you can do it like this, live. And if you can find a teacher that most of them have, but not all, an extensive experience in meditative practice. So they're quite familiar with these subtle realms between thought and perception. And when you do this gazing, also spend some time together with eyes closed, settling into that silent, more expansive, more fluid, more permeable field where the transmission can be maximized. So that's one thing. And another is be curious. Leave room for the unexpected ideas or images and give them credence. Don't miss these small things. These little cries and whispers of your heart might be missed. And as an example, I'll just take an example of my own life. One thing that happened to me earlier on in my process, I started having this image in my dreams, both night dreams and daydreams. If I was sitting in my truck on the way to a job site and I'm at a red light, this image kept coming. And the image was of a sword. I thought, this is odd. And it went on for a while, a month or two, and it just kept coming back. And it would shift a little bit. It would be a hand reaching for a sword, or it would be something else. But it was always that sword. And so I finally decided, okay, I'm just going to go online, and I got a theatrical, prop, and it looks like this. And I would pick this up and hold it each day, and I'd have it sitting out, and somehow it was significant. It was important, and it stabilized me in an early process when I was making one of the biggest transitions that I've made since I got involved in this work, is to turn a corner on a lifetime of living from a place of agreeability and accommodation and acquiescence. I finally, at the age of, 58, learned how to stick up for myself, speak for myself. And so be ready for unexpected images or or ideas. And in this process, this being tantric as it is, I would say, a significant or a central place in our iconography is the feminine face of God. The goddess, the beloved, is significant in this work. If that's of interest to you, you may find some representative of that, whether in the West, there's not a lot. I mean, in the Christian tradition, there's either Mary, or in the Eastern Orthodox, they've also got Sophia. But in the Eastern, more body-friendly religions, Hinduism and Buddhism, there's a whole panoply of feminine divine archetypes, which may be helpful, may not. It's up to you. You have to follow your own impulses and inclinations. But if there's some curiosity, there's some place in you that is wondering about that, you might, at some point, when you're alone and feeling receptive, just say, I'd like to know more about you. What can you tell me? And then just wait. It might be a day, a week, 6 months. But at some point, if you're paying attention, you may just suddenly see a picture on a book cover, or you'll hear someone say something about, you'll mention whatever, Kali or Parvati or Green Tara or something else, and it hits you. So pay attention to these little things. And I have a friend in Fairfield who wrote a book called Every Day a Miracle Happens, and it's basically a 365-page book that mentions all the patron saints that are assigned to a day of the year. And looking through there, you may find someone who really speaks to you. Or if they say, like they say, we all have a guardian angel. The thing is, if you never ask for help, he or she is unemployed. So I would see if that speaks to you in some way. Because the thing is, this whole being realization includes all of this, all the way from the most transcendent, silent, empty, spacious, whole, imperishable being, all the way down to the most particular, individuated, and distinct and contingent reality of the flux, the flow of phenomena. But in between, there's a whole range of other realms which may be of use to you in this journey. And so just listen and notice your hunches or your intuitions or your dreams or your longings or your leaps of faith or your inspirations. And pay attention to those and give them credence. And one other thing I do often when I'm leading these weekend exercises, we may have done, I don't remember if we did this when I was there in San Diego, Joe, but I ask people to pair off at the end of the weekend and sit with another person who's participating and just look at them and remember all the things that you've exchanged with them over the weekend and things that you've heard them speak of. And see, you have a sense of maybe their soul nature. And then I ask them to write down, I like them to imagine you've been asked to speak at their memorial service. And what would you say about this person and their soul's journey? Because, we often don't notice, because we've lived with them our whole life. Our gifts may be more apparent to others than they are to us, because your gifts are what people get when they really get you, your deeper nature. So these are a number of things I would suggest on this particular path, this journey. And I would like to close, if I may, with, speaking of journey, some words from Mary Oliver called The Journey. One day, you finally knew what you had to do and began, though the voices around you kept shouting their bad advice. though the whole house began to tremble, and you felt the old tug at your ankles, mend my life, each voice cried. But you didn't stop. You knew what you had to do. Though the wind pried with its stiff fingers at the very foundations, though their melancholy was terrible, it was already late enough in a wild night, and the road full of fallen branches and stones. But little by little, as you left their voices behind, the stars began to burn through the sheets of clouds. And there was a new voice, which you slowly recognized as your own, that kept you company as you strode deeper and deeper into the world, determined to do the only thing you could do, determined to save the only life you could.